Welcome to the Foul Play YouTube channel.
Well, thank you there, Mr. Kratz. Good to hear your voice.
Hey,
Not.
sugar.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And welcome, guys. Welcome. It's great to be here. And thank you so much, guys, for joining us in chat. This is our regular weekly podcast entitled Reading with Uncle Ken. And we're actually on part 52 at the moment. Believe it or not, we've been analysing Mr. Kratz's book for probably well over a year now. Thank you so much for staying with us. I realise the pain, but we appreciate the support. For those of you who have been following along, we're on chapter 15 at the moment, entitled The Day the Circus Came to Town. And my name is Dr. Silkman, and I'm from the Foul Play team. Thank you guys for joining us. As you know, if you like what we do in Foul Play, please subscribe to our channel. If you like our podcast, please give us a thumbs up and put on the notification bell. That way, when a podcast comes along, you'll know that something has been uploaded. And we have many different podcasts, as you guys are well aware. We have the Crime Theory Exchange. We have the Open Mic. We have a very, very active YouTube channel where you'll find a lot of uploads of our presentations. You'll also find the phone calls, jail phone calls, calls from law enforcement officers. There's hundreds of them for you to have a listen to when you have a little bit of time and to do your own research. We also have an extremely active Discord channel. There's always something happening there, just about 24/7. Please come and join us in Discord if you want to have a chat. There's always someone, at least from the panel, who's on there. We are from all over the world, and I'm sure you get to encounter us at some stage. If you'd like to support us even further, we have a merchandise store where you can buy T-shirts and mugs and other items, and all the proceeds from that go to a worthy cause. We will be changing who we donate the money to in about 6 months' time. But I've got my T-shirt, I've got my mug, and they're really, really excellent. So if you want to support us, you can buy something from the merch store. Also, in addition, you can support us on YouTube. There are various memberships that you can pay for. They're not only for a few dollars per month. And like I say, all the money that we make from our podcasts and from our YouTube channel, merchandise, we use that money wisely. We use that money predominantly for FOIAs to purchase documents, and we place those documents on our library. Please check our library. It's on the internet, of course, and there's a huge amount of material present in that library. We have, of course, Yuriza's interactive map. We've got a lot of documents, official documents from the trials, both Stephen and Brendan. We've got a lot of case material as well. So if you're interested in doing any form of research, guys, please come along, check out our website. It's being updated all the time. Thank you so much. And remember, if you want to help Foul Play, we're looking for someone to help us in the PR department, to help advertise us. And if any of you guys in chat are interested, please give Neverly a call. Neverly is overseas at the moment and should be returning, I think, within 1 or 2 weeks, and then she'll be returning back on our panel. Well, look, guys, a big shout out to everyone who has joined us in chat. And at the moment, we have TTM Fangirl. We've got Checking Convictions. We've got Sher. Who else have we got? We've got JD. We've got Dark Side of the Moon. Welcome, guys. We've got Angie. We've got Pete Moss. And we've got Andy B. and I probably missed out a few people, but and Jaznaz. Look, guys, thank you so much. We've got Kelly, and we've also got the Gov. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. We do this for you guys, and the support that you give us is really, really important. Well, look, guys, what I'd like to introduce are our panel members for today. Please tell us who you are and how things are coming along. First of all, we have Alice.
Hi, Doc. Thank you. Hi, everyone in chat. Thanks for joining us. Hi, everyone on panel. It is 11:14 p.m. here in a cold Scotland with 3 degrees Celsius.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Alice. And next we have Susan.
Hello, everyone. It's a gorgeous, beautiful, sunny spring day here in Southeast Kansas in the high 60s. And so welcome, everyone. Glad you're here.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Susan. And next we have Jack 61. What? Well, wait a minute. Hold on. Oh, no. Now, guys in the chat, you guys can't hear Jack 61. Oh, dear God.
Oh, no.
Jack 61. You just, Rhonda. Thank you for joining us.
I I am so sorry that I'm so late. I was whoops. And my YouTube is on. I'm having a rough day. Oh my goodness. I just got stuck in a I don't want to call it a political conversation, but my daughter and I were discussing Disneyland and all that business, and so we were just conversating. So I apologize I'm late.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's good to hear you and good to see you here, just Rhonda. Thank you so much. And finally, we have our latest new mod. I don't recall. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Silkman. Hello, everyone, and it's 6:16 here in New York, and it's 40 in the 40s and sunny, so pretty nice.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Now, I just want to just check in chat. Did you guys hear all of us, or was Jack 61 the only person that you can't hear? Please let us know. It was just you? Okay. So, so if you can't hear Jack 61, or what I'll do is I'll try and relay his responses to our members in chat. Well, look, everyone, welcome. My name is Dr. Silkman, and it's a beautiful day here in Adelaide. It's about 10 to 8 in the morning, and it looks gorgeous outside. Look, thank you so much for joining us. All right, so, wait a minute. Okay, so hopefully you guys can hear us. What we'll do, we'll make a start. Now, as you know, we're reading chapter 15 from Ken Kratz's book, and what we've covered so far, we've covered the blood in the RAV4. We've discussed that. We've also talked about the key that was found by Lenk, Colburn, and Kachansky in Stephen Avery's bedroom. We also talked about the hood latch swab. Now what we're going to be doing is what I believe a very, very controversial area, and that's discussing the bones, right? And I tell you what, it truly is mind-blowing when you're looking at or when you're trying to research the cremains. So as we know, Teresa Halbach was last seen on the 31st of October 2005, and her phone stopped pinging at 2:41 p.m. that very day, and no one has seen her since. Now that we know that Pam of God found the Toyota RAV4, which belonged to Teresa Halbach, on the Avery salvage yard on November the 5th, which was a Saturday. Now we also know that literally hundreds of people descended on the Avery salvage site. They were looking for Teresa or her body or whatever. They couldn't find Teresa Halbach anywhere. They found her Toyota RAV4, but they couldn't find Teresa. Now, what is very interesting is that Stephen Avery had a burn pit just at the back of his house. But near his burn pit was his dog named Bear. And Bear was chained up, and Bear had his own house where he lived in, his own kennel. But Bear was able to get very, very close to the burn pit area. Now, this was the excuse that Mr. Kratz used as to why no cremains were found earlier than when they were found. And basically what he alluded to in court was that Bear was very aggressive, very vicious, didn't allow any of the investigators or searchers anywhere near the burn pit. But what is very interesting is that Mr. Kratz had asked Bobby Dassey during the trial, and he said, "Can you tell me whether Bear is vicious?" Now remember, Mr. Kratz kept on saying that Bear was a very vicious Alsatian German Shepherd that prevented any of the researchers or searchers to go anywhere near the burn pit. Bobby Dassey responded, no, Bear was very, very timid, very, very quiet. And Mr. Kratz completely changed topics, right? Because he knew he wasn't going to get anything from Bobby Dassey when it came to Bear. But no one, absolutely no one, and guys on the panel, you can back me up, no one had made a statement that when they were around the burn pit area that they smelt something really foul, something was not quite right, something was repulsive in the air, nothing, right? And everybody, now I don't know, hopefully nobody from chat has actually smelt a burning body, human body, but apparently everyone that has says it has a very distinct smell, a very repugnant smell, and it's a smell that you don't forget. Well, no one had mentioned any sign of a smell or anything like that. Now, what is very interesting here is that cremains were found in Stephen Avery's burn pit, but not actually in the burn pit. They originally found some bones were found in the grass area, right? Not actually in the burn pit, but within the grass area around the burn pit. So it was very interesting. Now, these remains or bones were actually Andy B. Look at that comment. I don't know, Andy B. Unbelievable. We're meant to be serious here, guys. All right. So some bones were found around the burn pit, actually within the grass area. Now, what is remarkable here is that you would think common sense would take place. That is, you come across what obviously looks like bones. No one knew at that stage whether they were human or animal. And you would think at that stage that you would call the coroner. unfortunately, the actual coroner, Deborah Kakic, had actually found out about the discovery of the human remains or cremains on television, right? And when the coroner actually wanted to come on board and come to the Avery salvage site, she was called in for a meeting, and she was told in no uncertain manner that if you step foot on the Avery salvage yard, you're going to be arrested, right? Now, this is the state's own coroner. Now, what is proper procedure here is that when a body or body parts or cremains are found, the first person you call is the coroner. Now, I know that Ken Kratz said that a coroner just kicks the body. That's actually not true. The coroner has the number one authority when it comes to the finding of a deceased person or even cremains. The entire area is roped off, taped off, and the coroner brings her own team of specialists into where the cremains have been found, right? However, this didn't take place. Now, a coroner has her own team of investigators, her own team of forensic anthropologists. So therefore, the correct procedure is to immediately call the coroner. The coroner comes in and everyone is turfed out, right? The site is roped off and it is very, very carefully examined. Now, guys, the excuse about the dog is absolute garbage, right? There were canines and canine handlers on the property on November the 5th, right? Cadaver dogs, scent dogs were brought in, and they also had animal handlers. It's remarkable that no one had the gumption to use an animal handler or even a tranquilizer dart to pacify Bear and remove Bear from the property. If they were really concerned, all they had to do was call a family member to get the dog and take the dog off the property, right? So I think Bear was used as an excuse. Now, panel, I want to ask my panel, guys, what did you think about the whole we can't check the burn pit because of Bear scenario? Alice, do you have any comments about that? Oh, Alice, we didn't hear you. You want to say that one again? Oh, no.
Come on.
Oh, no, there you are. You're back.
Am I back?
You're back. You're back. You're back. We've got the heebie-jeebies.
Oh, my laptop's being playing funny buggers tonight. The whole situation with the dog is bloody ridiculous. They could have easily have got a dog handler or something like that to come in and take the dog away. You know, it's just it's I'm flabbergasted at what they've done to that bloody burn pit. You know what I mean? And
Correct.
the fact that they're blaming the dog as well is just ridiculous. As you say, Doc, they could have easily have got a dog handler to move Bear out the way, and they never. It's just
Correct.
bollocks.
It's actually quite shameful. You're correct, Alice. And to think that Mr. Kratz during the trial said, "Oh yeah, we couldn't get near the burn pit until the 8th, until we had to remove Bear," which is crazy because they did remove Bear, right? Eventually they did remove Bear. So what's the reason why they couldn't remove Bear on the 5th? Susan, do you have any comments?
Yeah, it's just simply a ridiculous story made up by Kratz to explain the inexplicable find of the bones.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Very good point. Jack61, I'm almost too scared to ask you, though. What do you think about the Bear situation? Can you hear yourself? You're not coming through. Oh, dear God. All right. So, Jack 61, do you have a quick comment about Bear? Yeah. Okay. Jack 61 agrees essentially with what Alice says. It's all bollocks. And West Virginia, we welcome you. Thank you so much. We've got Paul Pepiat in chat as well. Thank you so much. Angie Dickinson, thank you guys for joining us. Yeah. All right. Just Rhonda, do you have any comments about Bear and the burn pit?
Yeah, the whole story was horseshit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's going straight to the point. Correct. But that's the excuse that Kratz had used in court, that Bear was vicious and wouldn't allow any of the searchers anywhere near the burn pit. Quote unquote, he was protecting the burn pit. I don't recall. Do you have any comments about Bear and the burn pit? And welcome, by the way.
Thank you. I agree with everybody and I never remember hearing anything about him being this vicious killer dog. So I think it's a bunch of BS. And did they offer anything at trial to like have somebody testify that either for or against that statement?
The funny thing is, I don't recall, was that Mr. Kratz asked Bobby Dassey about whether Bear was vicious, and Bobby said, no, he's tame, he's timid, right? And, the remarkable thing is, guys, is that I think it was Trooper Reese who took that famous photograph of Bear standing on top of the burn pit. Well, the remarkable thing is that he did a video. There's a video in which he videotapes the burn pit. And you can see Bear in the background minding his own business, not barking, not being aggressive. He couldn't give a two hoots, right? So I think Bear being vicious was a real poor excuse by Kratz. So remember, guys, the investigators were on the Avery salvage site on November the 5th. Then we have what occurred. We don't know what was found at Cuss Road on November the 7th, right? Then, out of the blue, on November the 8th, nearly all the major pieces of evidence are now found. And as I said to you before, I think Jack 61 had put up a series of pictures of the burn pit, which I'll talk about in a second. Well, anyway, when these bones were found surrounding the burn pit, now these bones were in the grass, right? They weren't in the burn pit area. No coroner was called, right? No coroner was called. In fact, no forensic anthropologist was also called at the site as well. So they seem to have bypassed all the normal logic of what you are meant to do. And that is, you call in a coroner, you call in a forensic anthropologist to look at the bones. Now, guys, you've all seen crime scene shows. When they find a body or when they find cremains, the first thing you do is you totally protect the site where the body or the cremains are found. What is absolutely critical is that you do proper documentation. In other words, you need to document where every piece of bone has been found, right? So you know how the bones have been burnt or disturbed in any manner. None of that took place. Now, what is frustrating here, guys, and I'm actually embarrassed to even say it, panel, do we have any in situ photographs of the human cremains in the burn pit? Yes or no? Just Rhonda.
No, there are none. And it was the thing that when I watched Ma'am the first time, I remember watching that going, wait a minute, what the fuck are they doing? There's no coroner there. There's no proper procedure for protecting the burn pit. And
Correct.
and they're just digging at will with that
Correct.
that dirt thing.
Correct. Correct. 100% correct. And Susan, do you have a comment
Yeah,
about
I just want to say that, if they, you know, say that Kakach has a conflict of interest, why didn't they bring in a coroner from Calumet County?
correct. Correct. So all the proper that's a very good point, Susan. So all the proper procedures that should have been followed were not followed, right? Now, this is going to blow your mind. The only in situ photographs that we have of that burn pit are the ones where you see bear, right? So every photograph that you see bear in, what you'll notice is that there is no police tape. These photographs were taken by Trooper Reese, right, on November the 6th. These photographs are critical because if you remember the photographs that Jack 61 put up, he might be, yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Now, that photograph is showing bear near the burn pit. Now, let me tell you right now, this was done on November the 6th. There's no crime scene tape. No one had checked that burn pit. Guys, if you are to believe the state, Teresa Hobart, her cremains are in that burn pit, right? Her cremains are in there. On the bottom, you see that black ash. Her cremains are in there, if you are to believe the state's scenario. Now, Trooper Reese, he took photographs all around the burn pit. Trooper Reese never said, "Jeepers, I see something unusual. I see some bones. I smell something." Nothing. Okay? No one, he didn't alert anything. So every photograph you see that's got bear in it, they are in situ pictures of the burn pit. Now, that's correct. Yeah. And as you can see, bear, he's minding his own business. He's not being aggressive. But you need to have a look at the video whereby bear just simply walks and sits down and is not paying any attention to Trooper Reese or whoever's taking the video. So that really blows the idea that bear was aggressive. Bear couldn't give a stuff, right? I mean, he's a dog on a chain. He's obviously guarding the property. All they had to do was either call a family member and take bear away if they were that concerned. But the ridiculous thing, if you look at the CASO and the trial documents, is that they actually went and fed bear, right? They gave him food and drink, so they're obviously not too scared of him. All right. So, guys, do we have any questions from the panel and also from the chat? Guys, do we have anything? How are we doing?
I think it looks.
Just Rhonda.
Okay. Chat looks okay. Just a lot of comments.
Good. Did everyone?
Did y'all hear Jack?
Did everyone hear Jack? One? Oh no! Oh no! Okay. So we've got, unfortunately, Jack 61 has got a problem with the microphone. All right. So let's continue here, guys. So instead of calling a coroner or a forensic anthropologist, I think they called the crime lab. And I know that Ertl and other people were there. And what they did is that they used a shovel to pick up the ash. Now, it was noted during the trial that the cremains were in a pile in the middle of that burn pit. But there's a problem with that. If you have a look at the photograph with bear standing in front of the burn pit, if you actually expand that picture, you won't see any cremains in a pile. Now, this is November the 8th, where they're talking about finding cremains or bones put in a pile in the middle of that burn pit. So something is clearly not right here, right? First of all, how do you explain the fact that there are bones surrounding the burn pit, right, on the grass area? And secondly, Why is it that now all of a sudden you see a pile of bones in the center of that burn pit, right? It makes no sense. Now that burn pit itself is around about 4 or 5 feet square. It's not a very, very big burn pit. So what I believe it was Erdl and a couple of other guys, what they did is they set up a sifting device and they simply picked up the ash and they started sifting the ash pile. So larger fragments would stay on the top of the sifting apparatus, smaller fragments will go down towards the bottom, and things like dust and dirt and fine ash will go straight through. Now, what is remarkable is that when it became dark, the entire crew just left, right? They left. There was a saw blade, there were other instruments. Because it got dark, they all actually left the burn pit area, right? And I think what they did is they placed everything in tarps and they bagged it, right? So the sifting process, they actually had stopped because it had gotten dark. Now, if you have a look at Cuss Road, what you'll see at Cuss Road is that they actually brought out lights, right? And I think there are some photographs that actually show some of the lights. I think they did bring some of the lights at the burn pit area, but I'm not sure whether they were operational or not. But quite clearly, they didn't spend hours and hours sifting through the burn pit. When it got dark, they just shut up shop and they left. They put a blue tarp on top and left. Yet at Cuss Road, we can actually see that they had actually put lights, and those lights were turned on. They were there for many, many hours at Cuss Road, whereas it seems at the burn pit, they're in a real hurry. All right, guys, panel, do we have any comments so far? Does anyone have any comments? Just Rhonda, do you have any comments?
I think it was Paul. Oh no, Ronald Cass just asked a question. Could anyone ever interview Trooper Reese?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, I know that we've got a lot of DCI documents. I need to go check to see whether anyone did interview him, because that'll be very, very interesting. Jack 61, do you have a comment? Okay, so it looks like Trooper Reese was interviewed during the pre-trial. I'll have to reread it again to see what he talked about. But Trooper Reese was involved in coming up with a 3D map. Is that correct? I think he was involved in taking up measurements and things like that, because he wrote a report, a very large. Oh, that's Trooper Austin. That's Trooper Austin. My apologies. Yeah, so Trooper Reese did take photographs, and I think he was interviewed during the pre-trial. That's definitely worth checking out. Thank you so much, Ronald. That's a very, very good question. All right, then. Susan, do you have a comment?
Just everything about that burn pit, the way it was handled, the way the bones were found, everything about it is sketchy. And had
100% correct.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree with you. Like, you don't find any pictures that show the cremains in situ. There is no video of them doing the sifting. There's absolutely nothing that I have seen. Alice, do you have a comment? Oh, thank you, Susan. Alice, do you have a comment?
Yeah, it's Paul Pipiat. Paul Pipiat in chat says there is a case law in the UK for failing to protect a crime deemed abuse of process.
100% correct. Yep, 100% correct. And if you're having a look at the pictures, Jack 61 had put on a few of the images showing the at Cuss Road with the lights, and there was helicopter hovering up above taking photographs of the events at Cuss Road, and it was nighttime. The whole area was illuminated for hours, and it's pretty remarkable that, according to Mr. Kratz and Mr. Colburn, there was nothing there. It was just a peat moss bag. So they obviously spent a lot of time there erecting up lights, etc., etc. And there was a big blue tarp there as well. But according to the state, nothing was found there. So the Stephen Avery burn pit is actually quite small. And you could tell the way it was done, they would have got a skip steer or one with a bucket and just scooped amount of dirt out, and that was the burn pit. Now, Stephen Avery used the burn pit to burn rubbish. They also had burnt animal remains in there as well. So finding bones was not a surprise, right? I mean, they were hunters. They hunted deer, and of course they ate. They had barbecues and things like that. So finding bones in the burn pit is not a surprise. However, finding a human being in a burn pit is definitely a surprise, right? So there was no coroner. There was no forensic anthropologist. Now, Jack 61 also showed you some pictures which is totally mind-blowing. A couple of days later, they actually came in with skip steers and completely flattened and destroyed the burn pit. They flattened it. They took all the dirt out, and then they said that they did a little bit more sifting, which is truly remarkable. So they actually removed the entire burn pit. So the defense or no other researchers can go back in and have an actual look at the burn pit itself. It was completely flattened. And there was some famous images where I think one of the workers with a gloved hand was pointing at a bone, right? Well, big deal. What does that mean, right? If you don't know what that bone was, where it came from, you've got no idea. Was it animal? Was it human? You don't know. And it wasn't even in the burn pit, right? So that again goes to show you how bad this investigation was. Susan, do you have a comment?
I really wish that Strang or Buting would have described it as you just did in court, in front of the jury.
Yeah, I mean, it really, look, they did a really good job. I know that Strang did a very good job, but I don't believe Strang was, he wasn't pushy enough. Every time he tried to be pushy with Dr. Eisenberg, Tom Fallon used to object all the time, right? So, yeah, we'll talk about that in a sec. But the state literally destroyed the burn pit. So you can't go back. You can't have a look at the burn pit. Now, the burn pit area itself was very, very small. And what you notice when you have a look at the burn pit, it's open, right? It's an open area. One of the problems is, the other thing, of course, that I forgot to mention, was that Stephen had an arrangement with Josh Redont to burn brush, right? So if you see a lot of ash, a lot of soot, it's because he was burning brush as well. So Stephen had agreed to burn brush for Josh Redont. So that burn pit that you see, the state is telling you that according to what Brendan Dassey said, they put Teresa Horvath whole in that burn pit and cremated her. Well, one of the biggest problems, and before we get into that, when the investigators sifted the burn pit, right? When they sifted the burn pit, you end up with a box of bones, right? And if you've been doing research in this case, that box of bones is tag 8318. So all the bones you see in that box, it's a relatively small box, are from that burn pit. But there's one problem. we don't have any in situ photographs to actually prove that those cremains had come from that burn pit. Basically, you have to believe that those cremains had come from the burn pit, right? So it's the so-called box of bones. And I remember Bibi, you always used to say, came in a box, left in a box. And guys, when you don't have anything to document where those cremains come from, it's a real concern, okay? So the important thing is this, guys. Those cremains were placed in a box. Now, remember, there was no coroner, no forensic anthropologist present on the Avery salvage site. Those cremains were given to Dr. Ken Bennett, who was a retired forensic anthropologist. He was one of the very first people to have a look at those cremains, right? And from those cremains, Dr. Bennett had found an ilium bone. And an ilium bone is part of the pelvis. He had stated that that ilium bone was indeed from an adult human female, right? So this is the first time that we actually hear the fact that those cremains are likely from an adult human female, right? And the reason why you can tell is that if you're a forensic anthropologist, you look for diagnostic bones. In other words, bones which are different between a male and a female. A female has a different pelvic structure than a male. So the ilium bone was diagnostic of a female, right? So then after the box of bones were given to Dr. Eisenberg, right? So she wasn't the very first person to examine those cremains. She was actually the second to have a look at those cremains. Now, she also looked at the cremains, but she was able to determine that the cremains were from an adult human female, but she didn't use the ilium bone. She used other diagnostic bones to determine that they were in fact from an adult human female. But in court, Dr. Eisenberg was actually asked, were you on the property, ever on the property? She goes, no. So we have the state's forensic anthropologist who never set foot on the Avery salvage site. She was actually given the bones to examine. So whatever law enforcement had given her, she had assumed that they had come from the burn pit. Now, I notice in chat, the number one witness who said that there was a big whopping fire on Halloween on the 31st of October was none other than Scott Tadich, right? And he said that the flames were so high, they were as high as his garage. Well, there's only one problem with that. Right next to the burn pit in the same vicinity, and Jack 61 has put the photographs up, there's a big natural gas tank, propane tank, right? So if you've got a big whopping fire going on that's that tall, there's a danger that you can explode the tank of gas. And furthermore, Barb, his sister, used to complain that when Stephen had a huge fire going on, soot and ash would deposit on her house, right? And she used to complain about it, but there was no soot, there was no ash. I think Scott Tadich vastly exaggerated the fire, right? It wasn't 10 feet tall. It was probably more like about 2 or 3 feet tall. So
if there was a fire that night.
That's correct. Well, that's
And
the problem.
I honestly don't think in that small of a pit that you could even get a fire with flames that tall. There's just not enough room there for the fuel.
Excellent. And that's why Kathleen Zellner hired professionals, and she hired Dahan, right, who's number one authority on burning bodies and having a look at trauma that occurs due to fire, and he understands the nature of the burn pit. One of the couple of huge problems that you have with the burn pit: one, it's small. Two, it's open, which means that if you place fuel in that burn pit and burn it, because it's open, the majority of the fuel and the fire and the flames and the heat goes to the atmosphere. Alice, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, Doc, I'll need to maybe go back and check, but I'm sure when they're doing the flyover on, is it the third and the fourth, that pit is not like that.
Well, here's the problem, right? Because there's a lack of in situ pictures, right? Those photographs that you see with Bear, that's November the 6th, right? The flyover was on the 4th, right?
Yeah.
We don't know what happened. We don't know what happened, Alice.
Exactly, because if I remember right, the flyovers, when I watched that, and then they started going on about this burn pit in the back, at the back of the garage, and that, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, where is this friggin' burn pit? And then I seen these photos, and I was like, no fucking way in hell was that back garden and that pit dug like that on the flyover, because you would have seen all that gravel on top of the grass. I swear, if people go back and watch the episode when they're doing the flyover, or watch the flyover video, that pit is not, there is more grass around that pit and the flyover in the third and the fourth than there is that mark on the 6th. And this is it's one of these things that's been really bugging me about this whole case.
Correct.
Is I think they've dug that pit that deep themselves and burnt something in it themselves, and then these remains has done it. Because I swear, and it's going to bug me, so I'm going to have to go back and have a look, but I swear that that burn pit does not look like that on the flyover 3rd and 4th.
Yeah, you could well be right. You could well be right. But this is the problem, guys, when you don't do an investigation properly. Now, if Deborah Kakach was permitted to come onto the property, now remember, she had zero conflict of interest. She had never worked with Stephen Avery before. She didn't even know who he was, right? Apart from the information in the news. But the sheriff, Peterson, basically threatened her that if you appear on that property, you're going to be arrested. Now, don't forget, guys, they had already extracted the cremains from that burn pit because Deborah Kakach had found out about those cremains on TV. So how embarrassing that the state's forensic coroner finds out about finding human cremains on a property from television, right? And all her co-staff were phoning her up saying, boss, are we going or what? And so, of course, they were prevented from going onto the property. Now, guys, if the state has got nothing to hide, why not call in an official person like the coroner? Let me tell you, in Wisconsin, the coroner has the authority to arrest the sheriff. Okay? Deborah Kakach could have arrested Peterson. She has the number one. She's the number one when it comes to a crime, looking at a crime scene, especially if there's a dead body. She's the number one. She's the number one position. Peterson obviously was aware of this and didn't tell the coroner of the findings, not only at Cuss Road, but in Stephen Avery's burn pit. All right. Now, I just want to, welcome Sheila. Thank you for joining us. someone in chat had made the comment that there was a documentary in which they wrapped up a pig, and they used a lot of fuel, and they burnt the pig essentially overnight. I think you needed about between 9 to 12 hours and constant fuel supply. The pig essentially got broken down to bone fragments. So here's the deal. What you note about the bones in the box is A, there are no whole bones, right? You don't find a whole bone. You don't find a skull, a rib, a pelvis, a leg, a foot, nothing. You do not find any whole bones. What you find are tiny, small bone fragments. The biggest one, I believe, was 2.5 inches. The rest were about the size of your thumbnail. So whatever happened to Teresa Halbach, she was exposed to very, very high temperatures and a long period of time. So in order to get a body to cremains like that, you need almost crematorium levels of heat, right? So you need a large supply of fuel and time. Now, Stephen Avery had 2 phone calls from Jody for 15 minutes, and he spoke calmly. Jody didn't notice anything nefarious going on. So you know that if you're going to convert a human being to bone fragments like that, you need a lot of fuel. Now, I know a lot of the guilters are saying, oh, yeah, but he burnt tires. But you don't know how many tires he had burnt and whether he had burnt tires before, right? None of those cremains have any smell of rubber. None of those cremains have any evidence of being co-burnt with rubber tires, right? When when Dr. Eisenberg opened up the tubs of the bones, she didn't smell the presence of any rubber or fuel coming from that box of bones, okay? So there's no evidence that Teresa Halbach or the victim was ever co-burnt with tires, right? So to get a human being into that state of tiny bone fragments, you need a huge amount of fuel and you need time. But the problem is the burn pit itself is open, right? You can design burn pits that are covered and have got like a chimney. There's an actual name for it, in which they can reach extremely high temperatures, because what you do is you supply the burn area with a lot of oxygen, right? Oxygen is required for the fire to keep it all intact. But you can see from that burn pit, from the pictures that Jack 61 put up, there's a huge problem. It's small, it's open, and there's no evidence of a lot of debris, fuel, right? There's no evidence of that, right? So what you have on the bottom of that burn pit, that bottom of the burn pit is ground level, guys. It's ground level. It doesn't go much deeper than that. So that was scooped out, right? So from that tiny layer of ash, we are meant to believe that all those human cremains in that box came from there. And no one on the 5th, 6th, and 7th saw any bones. None. Panel, do we have any comments? And do we have any questions in chat? Who'd like to make a comment?
Cherie has a question.
Oh,
sorry.
Cherie, yes.
Oh, I just asked if this serious mishandling of the fire pit and the bones, finding the bones and all that, was ever brought up on appeal. because it's pretty serious, in my opinion.
Yeah, there was a lot of mentioning about the bones, and we'll actually get to that. I don't recall because we haven't even started asking the questions from Kratz's book. I just wanted to give everyone a picture of where we're at with these cremains. But that's a very good question. Just Rhonda, do you have a comment?
About the burn pit, it's just called a burn pit, right? We call it a burn pit. They called it a burn pit, but I have always, or as a burning area, because it wasn't a divot or a pit of any sort into the ground. It was like on top of the ground
Yes, it
where
was.
things were just piled on and piled on. So to define it as a pit is actually completely incorrect.
It's more like a burn area. It's more like a
Yeah,
yeah.
that's exactly what I'm on about, Rhonda. It did not look like a pit like it is in those photographs, because, as I says, when they do the flyover, it's mostly grass and it looks like a burnt patch. That's what it looks like to me. And then I seen the photographs of the so-called pit, and I was like, no way, you would have seen all that dirt and gravel lying on the friggin' top.
Correct. So essentially, that burn pit or burn area was scooped out by a skid steer, right? And Stephen basically built up the surrounding areas to prevent flames and stuff going to the sides. But that black ash that you see on the bottom, Jack 61 had put up some photographs. That's the bottom of the burn area, and it was that black ash that was sifted, and according to the state, those cremains that you see in that box came from that burn pit or that burn area. Alice, do you have a comment?
No, it's actually T1 who has just joined us in chat. Welcome, T1. He says, what bone fragments or samples are still in trial evidence, or was everything on the bones returned to the hallbacks?
Welcome, T1. I know people are going to get really pissed off about this. Well, if everything went as I think it did, all the human remains, all of them, all the human bones were sifted from the Ziploc bags, and all of them were sent to the funeral home, who then sent them on to the Hallbuck family. So if I'm correct, and I hope I'm not, it means that all the human remains have gone. There's nothing left for Zona to test. Now, think about it. If the state are going to give human cremains back to the Hallbuck family, who I don't even believe requested them, because I can't find any documentation unless someone on the panel or in chat has found them. I haven't found any evidence that the Hallbuck family actually did request them back. Jack 61. Right. If you didn't hear Jack 61, Jack 61 has put in some FOIA requests to see if the Hallbuck family had actually requested those cremains. But we haven't got any official documents as far as I'm aware. Susan, do you have a comment?
I don't know why I seem to recall that someone said that they still had the tibia that had the muscle tissue or whatever.
I would dare say that was given back, because absolutely know that the tibia is human. The tibia is the one that contained the charred muscle fragments, and that's what Colhane worked on to obtain the genomic DNA profile, a 7 out of 15 match that proved that it was a 1 in a billion chance of not being Teresa Hallbuck. So I would dare say that the tibia bone has definitely been given back. So, guys, here's the issue. If you're going to give the cremains back to the Horbach family, you give all the human bones back, because you got to remember, guys, no bones have been tested. None. No DNA has been extracted from any of the bones, only from the tissue, muscle tissue. Alice, do you have a comment?
Checking convictions in chat says no human bones, but what about the ones not tested? And then Dark Side of the Moon says they broke their laws, so what is going to be done about that? Probably nothing, Dark Side. Probably nothing.
Absolutely nothing. All the bone evidence, Zona can't present it again, is my understanding. That's all being tossed out. Everything is being tossed out. And what is disgusting, I know we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but what is shocking and disgusting was that Judge Angie Sukowicz said, well, the guys that sorted out the bones, they weren't forensic anthropologists, so they didn't know what they were sorting out. So hence, you can't actually prove that human bones were given back to the Horbach family, so hence they broke no laws. Right? That's what the judge said. So whoever sifted out the cremains, they broke no laws. But it's pretty obvious that if you read the documentation, they searched and sifted out of the Ziploc bags all the human bones, because they had Dr. Eisenberg's report with them. But how bizarre that you send law enforcement officers to sift out bones rather than hire a forensic anthropologist. It honestly makes no sense. All right, so let's get back to these cremains, right? Because the story gets even more bizarre. So in that box of bones, Jack 61 is just showing the flyover video at the moment. In those bones, box of bones, they also found cranial bone fragments, right? Cranial bone fragments. And Dr. Eisenberg stated that she found unnatural openings in those cranial bone fragments. She basically surmised that the victim, in this case Teresa Horbach, was shot at least twice in the skull, one in the back of the head and one near the left temple, right? That's almost like an execution style shooting. Once in the back of the head and one close to the left side of the temple. That's what those cremains had shown. Now, here's the bizarre thing. It became apparent that not only were human cremains found in that burn pit, but they also found human cremains in Yonder burn barrel number 2, right? But that's not where it ended. To make matters worse, they also found cut, burnt human cremains in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. They found, I believe, 3 debris piles, right? So in other words, human cremains were found in 3 different geolocations. They were found in the burn pit, they were found in Yonder burn barrel number 2, and they were found in debris piles in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. This is why, guys, if you've got some time, please go to our website and check out Uriza's interactive map, where he places on the map where those cremains have been found, so you can explore and learn more about those cremains. So now, this was bizarre. How do you burn a human body in one location, which is allegedly the burn pit, yet human cremains are found in Yonder burn barrel number 2 and also in the Manitowoc County gravel pit? here's the bizarre thing. Dr. Eisenberg had examined all of the cremains. She surmised that they came from an adult human female around about 30, 35 years of age, no signs of arthritis, so it was from a relatively young person, but all the cremains had come from one individual. One individual. So in other words, there weren't bones from a male, they were all from a female, they all came from one individual. And guys, here's the bizarre thing. Between 50 to 60% of the skeletal remains are missing. No one knows where they are. Now, I know that some bone can turn to ash, but some of the bones in the human body are extremely difficult to burn. For example, the spinal column, right? The ribs. No intact bones were found. So, guys, we have between 50 to 60% of the skeletal remains which are missing. Some of the bones in the Manitowoc County gravel pit had cut marks on them and saw blade marks on them. It can only mean that Teresa Horbach was dismembered and then burnt, right? Now, if you have a look, when Brendan Dassey was interrogated, did he ever mention, asking the panel, did he ever mention the fact that they had dismembered Teresa Horbach before cremating her? Panel, did Brendan ever mention dismemberment? Susan?
Absolutely not. They threw her on there whole.
Correct.
No, yeah.
Correct, guys. And he actually drew a picture. Remember? Alice, do you have a comment?
Yeah, no, I was just agreeing, Doc. Nothing was mentioned about cutting her up or chopping her up or anything like that. She was supposed to have been put on the fire whole.
100% correct. Susan, thank you, Alice. Susan,
and what is Kratz's explanation for that? That he cut her up with a shovel. I mean,
that's correct. That's correct.
Shovel doesn't make cut marks. I'm sorry.
That's correct. So now Stephen wasn't charged with mutilation of a corpse, but Brendan Dassey was. So they're saying that the bones were chopped up using garden tools. But what Mr. Kratz doesn't realize is that garden tools like shovels and picks and things like that are not going to make straight, fine blade cuts. And you're not going to get curve marks in your bones, right? So Kratz basically avoided it. But let me tell you right now, Fassbender and Uyghur knew that Teresa Horbach had been dismembered. And that's why they kept on asking Brendan whether they had used the hooks and the ropes and the chains that were hanging up in the garage, right? And Brendan, of course, said, no, none of that was used, right? Because they knew, Fassbender and Uyghur knew that Teresa Horbach had been dismembered, right? Now, if you know anything about Ed Gein, right? I won't even go into what Ed Gein did to one of his female victims. She was also hanging up from chains from the rafters, okay? And I won't go into it because it's horrific. So Stephen wasn't charged with mutilation of a corpse, but Brendan Dassey was, right? Now,
he was charged, but he wasn't convicted.
He wasn't convicted, correct. They found him not guilty of mutilation of a corpse, right? So, but Brendan Dassey was. Now, what's bizarre was, I think it was Erdl who said, oh, yeah, we actually found a saw blade near the burn pit, but we left it. So they didn't even test the tools that were found around the burn pit or the burn area to see if they could be forensically linked to Teresa Horbach. They didn't even check. They didn't even do a DNA test on the blade, nothing, right? Which is really, really bizarre. So guys, how on earth can you explain this? How can you have cremains in 3 different spots? Guys, anyone on the panel have you guys got any suggestions? How are these cremains found in 3 different spots? Alice, do you have a comment?
Yeah, because somebody moved them from a place to place to put in Stephen's pit, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that is my opinion. For these bones to have been found in different places, they've been moved, and it's been so that nobody can see them, and they've been moved from one place to the other and then dumped.
That's a possibility. That is a possibility. So Dr. Eisenberg said that the burn pit was the primary burn site, right? And Kratz made a big song and dance. Well, Scott Tad said there was a big whopping fire, but quite clearly there couldn't have been a big whopping fire. Otherwise, you would have found evidence of it. Also, when you burn a human body, because of the fat and the organic material inside a human body, you leave behind a black goo on the bottom, on the ground. I think it's pyrolysis, the event of pyrolysis, where the fat burns and leaves a gooey residue on the bottom of the burn pit. Guys, tell me, did they actually find any of that? Yes or no? Did they find any evidence of pyrolysis in that burn pit? Just Rhonda.
No, they did not.
No, they didn't. Alice?
No.
Susan?
Nope, and they certainly should have.
Correct. So despite a human being allegedly being cremated there in that burn area, there was no evidence of the black goo, right? There was a black crust because remember, Stephen had obviously burnt things there before. And according to Brendan, they'd burnt a cabinet, a couple of tires. There was an old car seat. But if you notice, the car seat's not in the burn pit. The car seat was off to the side of the burn pit. So that could have been easily burnt just slightly near it, right? So there was no evidence of burning of a human being in that burn pit. Now, here's the interesting thing, and some members in chat had actually mentioned it. It's a very, very good point. That's the teeth. Now, there were no crowns, there were no whole teeth found, right? There were no whole teeth found. There was a jawbone, parts of a jawbone. There were facial bones, but whole teeth were not found. All the crowns, that's the top part of your teeth, they were all gone. All the crowns were gone. All the teeth that were found were roots, the roots of the teeth, which are protected by the jawbone, but they were all fractured. Now, one of the forensic odontologists, I think it's odontologist is the term, he found 2 teeth roots, and I believe it was tooth number 31, I believe. It was tooth number 31, and it was Dr. Simley. And what Dr. Simley was able to do, he was able to get the x-rays of Teresa Hallbach's that were done to her teeth. And Dr. Simley looked at one particular tooth, tooth number 31. That's on the bottom of your right jaw. It's the second last tooth. And what he was able to do, he was able to super glue, that's right, he was able to super glue 2 roots together and try to match them to the dental x-rays. That's called fracture matching, whereby you take 2 roots and you try and join them back together again. He then compared the roots that were super glued to the Teresa Horbach's dental records, right? And these are called a Panorex X-ray. You've probably had them if you've ever gone to a dentist where you've got to put your head in this device and they take X-ray of all your teeth, right? And it's from ear to ear. Well, Dr. Sibley said the root was consistent, right? It was consistent with the tooth from Teresa Horbach's X-ray, but he couldn't say it was 100% match, right? So he had to super glue two roots together, or tooth number 31. And he said, yeah, it was consistent, but he was not prepared to say, yeah, it was 100% match. So here's the problem. The body was subjected to high degree of thermal destruction, extremely high. He reckons that that's the highest he's ever seen in an individual. So Teresa Horbach was essentially almost pretty well close to cremation type temperatures. And guess what? A burn pit or a burn area that Stephen had cannot reach those high degree temperatures. But guess what can? Anyone in panel want to guess what can reach that type of temperature? Just Rhonda.
A smelter, perhaps?
Possibly a smelter. They checked the smelters. There was no evidence of any bone fragments or the fact that the smelters were even used. But what else was present around the property?
Burn barrel. Burn barrel.
Burn barrel.
Burn barrel. Correct. A burn barrel. And Dr. Dahan has actually seen cadavers being burnt in burn barrels. And if you've got enough fuel, that is wood, and you make it that it's well ventilated, those burn barrels can actually reach extremely high temperatures. They can glow red, right? So what is important here, guys, is that the heat is contained, right, within a vessel, and it's radiant. The heat reflects back. So if you're dismembered, you're obviously into smaller fragments. It's much easier to cremate and burn you to bone fragments than it is in an open pit, right? So burn barrel is an ideal vessel to turn someone into bone fragments. Lo and behold, we have yonder burn barrel number 2 that's got human burnt cremains. Isn't that remarkable? Guys, on the panel, do we have any comments so far? All right. So from the cremains, guys, we can determine that we have one victim. We've got one victim. She's an adult female. We have approximately 50 to 60% of the skeletal remains that are missing. We know that the victim was shot at least twice in the skull, once in the back, once on the left temple. They found no kneecaps. Kneecaps were missing, right? But that potentially is not unusual because the kneecaps are very, very susceptible to burning. There were no whole teeth found. All the crowns were gone. Dr. Simley was able to superglue 2 teeth roots together to make a comparison, but he said that there was a likeness. He didn't say it was 100% accurate. And human cremains were found in 3 different geolocations, and that Teresa Horbach had suffered dismemberment. So that's really all we can say from the cremains that were found. We also know, and people in chat have also stated, by the way, only 35% of the skull was recovered. Okay? So parts of Teresa Halbach's skull is gone. We don't know where it is. Now, if you've ever seen a cremation, and I've seen a few videos of humans being cremated, what you find is that the person who does the cremation, at the end of the cremation, you have to use a metal bar to crunch the bones, because there are bones like the ribs, the pelvis, and also the skull that's extremely hard to burn, right? So what happens is they use the metal bar to crunch the bones. By the way, all these bones here appear to have been crunched, right? So in other words, there's no long bones at all. So these bones are all very, very heavily fragmented. Now, I don't believe there was any, just answering Sher's question, I don't believe no one mentioned any black goo in the burn barrels, right? No one had mentioned that. All right, guys, do we have any questions in the panel so far? Right, are we all good? Well, I hope, guys, that was...
Doc,
yes.
sorry. Just to clarify, what percentage of the bones do they actually find?
That's a bit controversial. They were found... Now, remember, the way they do this, they do it on weight, right? They do it on weight. So they know Teresa's body height, they know her weight, they know her age, and forensic anthropologists know the percentage of what by weight should be your mass of bones. About 50 to 60% of her was missing. So in terms of weight, they found about 50% of her skeletal remains.
Thank you.
Yeah, about 50%. The rest, I got no idea. I actually have no idea. So Kathleen Zellner is of the opinion that Teresa Halbach was burnt, cremated in a burn barrel in the quarry area, and that cremains were brought back to Stephen Avery's burn pit. But what is bizarre is what the hell are cremains doing in Yonder burn barrel number 2, right? So Ken Kratz, the only thing that Ken Kratz came up with, guys, was that, Stephen decided to pick up 4 of the largest bones, and we're talking about bones which are a couple of inches in length, and he decided to bring those bones in his sister's burn barrel, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Susan?
Cher had a question too. Would the black goo be in the barrels?
Yes, I answered Cher's question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I don't believe anyone had made any comment. But guys, here's the trouble. Here's the trouble, right? These guys were hunters, right? They were hunters, right? And we know that Bobby Dassey had skinned a deer and dismembered the deer, right? And what they do is that they burn the cremains. They burn the remains that are left, right? So when you gut a deer, you've got all the internal organs, etc., etc. What they do is they burn them, right? So if they burn them, then you don't know, when you see some black goo or whatever, you don't know what's what. But the interesting thing was they found some pupil casings in Yonder burn barrel number 2, right? And so what happens is, I know this is gross, but flies lay their eggs in rotting meat and flesh, and then they form the pupa, the larvae. So we don't know whether that is of significance. But guys, what I can't explain is, where's the rest of Teresa Halbach? Half of her is missing. About half of her is missing. They only found 35% of her skull. Where's the rest of her skull? Right? Now, the bullet holes in the cranial bone fragments, they were x-rayed and they showed flecks of lead, right? But they never found an outshot. So they could only prove that 2 bullets went in, but they can't find any evidence of bullets coming out. right? Because remember, Brendan said, oh, yeah, we shot it 10 or 11 times. There's absolutely no proof of that at all. Just Rhonda.
I was going to say there was a question from the chat from I don't recall, but she can ask her own question.
I don't recall. Fire away.
I just wondered if it was the number 2 barrel that was taken away, then brought back. The one with the bones in it.
Yeah. There were definitely some funny shenanigans going on because barrel number 4.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But there was a barrel that had left, and Ken Kratz asked it to come back onto the property. We know that Yunda's family had 4 burn barrels. And allegedly what they did is that they wrote the numbers actually on the burn barrels. But we know that there was a burn barrel at Cuss Road that was circled with police tape. So Lord knows whether there's been a barrel swap, because what they did is that they emptied the contents of the burn barrel in a tarp, and they taped
Yes.
what went with what. Susan, do you have a comment?
Do you mean there was one at the deer camp? Not
Yes,
Cuss
there was
Road.
one. Not, but yeah, what I meant was it was at the deer camp, but at the back you can see the word cuss. Yeah, so there was and I believe a dog hit on that burn barrel. So there's some very interesting things going on, right? So how can you explain if Stephen Avery had done this? Don't you think he would have picked up all the cremains, put them in about 4 or 5 buckets, and took them somewhere and dumped them? Why would he put some bones in his own sister's burn barrel, go all the way down to the Manitowoc County gravel pit, and dump bones in 3 different debris piles, and yet leave the majority of the cremains in his backyard, his burn pit, his burn area? It honestly makes no sense whatsoever. Alice, do you have a comment?
No, Jack, say something. Darkside said she heard you for a wee bit, and Andy B says he thought he heard you say S.
Ah. Oh dear. So in other words, you could respond, but we won't hear you. Is that right? If you use the test. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And we welcome Jeff Jones in chat. Thank you for joining us, Jeff. And if you and of course, sorry, Galataki. Um, thank you so much for joining us. It's fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. We really appreciate you joining us and all of your comments. Yeah, and if you haven't checked out Jeff Jones, he's doing a series of podcasts in which both myself, Kelly, and Big Jeff, we're looking at Man One, and we're commenting on Man One at the moment. Check out his podcast. Jeff Jones is doing a really good job. Fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. So, yeah, look, in terms of the bones, we've got some really weird things going on. Now, the state's forensic anthropologist, I promise we'll get to the questions, I promise. The state's forensic anthropologist was Dr. Leslie Eisenberg. Now, the problem was that Leslie Eisenberg never stepped foot in the Avery salvage yard. So basically, she was handed a box of bones and asked for them to be examined. As she was examining those bones, more bones were being delivered to her, obviously from Yunda Burn Barrel number 2 and from the Manitowoc County gravel pit. So she examined all the bones. During the trial, it became very, very obvious, and Jack 61 is correct, Dr. Leisenberg for sure. 100% correct. So the amazing thing was, Ken Kratz said, I'm not going to talk about the Manitowoc County gravel pit. I'm going to talk about it for 20 seconds. He did not want to talk about those cremains at all because he realized that it was going to weaken his case that Stephen was this psychopathic murderer who had cremated Teresa Halbach in his burn pit, etc., etc. He didn't want to know about the bones in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. But here's where it's disingenuous. A report was written by Dr. Eisenberg in which she states quite clearly that the bones in the Manitowoc County gravel pit were cut, burnt, and human. And she had mentioned that in many, many occasions in her report. Now, guys, this is going to blow your mind. Because Eisenberg never talked about the bones in the Manitowoc County gravel pit as being human, then that's regarded as the truth, right? That's what they testified to. So hence, anything outside of the court is not what occurred during the trial. And that's why you'll see that every time Kathleen Zellner tried to introduce the bones that were found in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, the state would reject that evidence, right? So there had to be a reason why. There had to be a reason why that Zellner, not Zellner, why Kratz did not want to talk about those cremains in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, right? All right, now guys, in the panel and chat, do we have any questions? Are we all good?
Cherie?
Susan.
Cherie had another question.
Cherie. Come on, I
Keep
don't
calling me
recall.
out. Oh, I just said that didn't Eisenberg say something like they were possibly human or was it?
Oh yes, what a perfect segue. All right, guys. Now, if TTM Fangirl is in our chat, we can actually start the podcast proper. Now, sorry for talking for so long, but it's important to understand about the cremains because there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of misconceptions. Now, I want to tidy this up right now. This is very important. There's been a lot of controversy about whether Teresa Halbach has been identified, or whether she's alive, etc., etc. Okay, well, you have to try and identify whose cremains that they belong to. There's another Pam of God moment. There happened to be one or two bone fragments that happened to have some charred muscle tissue stuck to it. So not all the bones had been completely burnt. So if you expose a bone to extremely high temperatures, that of a crematorium, most of your bones will be calcined. They appear a greyish white colour. The bone almost resembles porcelain. It means that all the organic material in the bone is gone. It's all burnt, it's all dried up. And bones are living tissues, right? Bones are living. They are full of blood, they're full of cells, nerves, blood vessels. They're a rich source of DNA, right? That's why scientists try and extract DNA from bones. There's one problem. Most of the bones were completely burnt out. However, there was a bone fragment known as item BZ that happened to have some some charred muscle tissue on it. Now, that bone fragment, item BZ, was sent to Cherie Cohen. Cohen was able to prepare genomic DNA from that charred muscle tissue. she got a 7 out of 15 loci match, right? Now, each loci has 2 alleles. So from 7 loci, she was able to get 14 alleles, including the gender marker, which came up as female. So that means that there was a 14 out of 14 allele match to the pap smear belonging to Teresa Horbach. A 14 out of 14 allele match, but only 7 loci came up. Why? The other loci didn't come up because the DNA was fragmented. Because remember, the body was exposed to extremely high heat. It was a miracle that there was some DNA present, right? And that's why Kathleen Zellner wanted to retest the bones using the anti-rapid DNA method. That's been shown to be really good at extracting genomic DNA from burnt bones, but the state gave away all the bones, right? So from item BZ, 14 out of 14 alleles matched the pap smear of Teresa Horbach. There is a 1 in a billion chance that that's not Teresa Horbach. And at that time I checked, there were about 7 people in the entire world that had that genomic DNA profile. 7. And we know 1 was in Wisconsin and 1 was a missing woman, right? So when you do the odds, it's an extremely high chance that those cremains do belong to Teresa Horbach. Now, muscle tissue was also sent to the FBI. The FBI could not extract any DNA from bones, but what the FBI did was they were able to extract mitochondrial DNA from that muscle tissue. The mitochondrial DNA is inherited from your mother, only from your mother. There was a match to the mitochondrial DNA from the cremains to Karen Horbach. Now, Karen Horbach had heteroplasmy. She had 2 different pools of mitochondria that varied in one base, one sequence. Teresa Horbach had that sequence. So from a mitochondrial DNA point of view, from a genomic DNA point of view, that's Teresa Horbach, right? She's been killed and cremated, right? From
Doc,
yes.
could you just clarify for Angie? You're talking about the FBI test for the mitochondrial, right?
The FBI did the mitochondrial DNA testing, correct? Mitochondrial
And Culhane did the other.
Cherie Culhane did the genomic DNA testing on item BZ. Correct. So there were 2 independent tests. Culhane worked on item BZ. The FBI worked on muscle tissue and did mitochondrial DNA analysis. Mitochondria is excellent because it's small. The DNA is smaller, higher copy number, more resistant to fire because there's so many more copies of it. And it comes from your mother. So all the mitochondria in your body come from your mother. Okay, it's directly transmitted from your mother. It's because the egg, the unfertilized egg, contains mitochondria from your mother. Sperm very, very rarely enter in mitochondria. They normally just enter in the sperm head that contains the genomic DNA, right? So as a test, the mitochondrial DNA test is almost proof positive that that's Teresa Horbach from the mitochondrial DNA alone. But from the genomic DNA, a 14 out of 14 alleles, 100% match, boom. That's definitely Teresa Horbach. 1 in a billion that is not her. All right. So, guys, that's the DNA story. That's the story of the bones, right? Anyone researching on the bones, good luck, because it's extremely complicated. There are many tag numbers. They're everywhere. All right. Alice, do you have a comment?
Yeah, it's actually one from BW Haggis. Welcome, Haggis. He says Sherry Culhane shouldn't be trusted to do a COVID lateral flow test, never mind any lab tests.
Look. I think most people will realise I'm Sherry Culhane's harshest critic, right? I really am. But however, in this particular case, she had backup from the FBI. So if she couldn't extract the genomic DNA from the muscle tissue, the FBI would have done so, right? And don't forget, Culhane actually had the pap smear to compare it to. So this is something that Culhane can't fake, in actual fact, because she actually has the standard of Teresa Halbach, right? If there was no standard, then you don't know whose cremains they belong to. So definitely having the pap smear as a standard was very important, because she was able to extract DNA from the blood in the back of the RAV, from the cherry Pepsi can as saliva, and from touch DNA in the inner door handle on the driver's side door. They all matched. So it's a very, very high chance that you've got that person who's been cremated is indeed Teresa Halbach. My apologies. Yes, but you're right. BW Haggis, I do not trust Culhane. Correct. All right, guys. Let's see if we can get at least one question done. But I had to give the background of the bones. All right. So I quote this from chapter 15. Of all the reinterpretations of evidence floated in MAM 2, that concerning the burned human remains found in Avery's own pit, in Dassey's family burn barrel, and possibly in property surrounding the Avery salvage yard is perhaps the most misleading, right? The most misleading. Here's the question to the panel. Why did Dr. Eisenberg refuse to classify the cut, burnt bone fragments from the Manitowoc County gravel pit as an evidence tag 8675 as being human? Susan?
I believe because Kratz directed her that way.
You mean Mr. Kratz was potentially intimidating to Dr. Eisenberg?
Possibly.
Good point. Now, evidence tag 8675 came from the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Jack 61. Yes. If you Jack 61 essentially agreed with Susan. If you have a look at Dr. Eisenberg on the stand, her eyes are popping out of her head. She looks like a deer in headlights. She's terrified of saying the wrong thing. Alice, do you have a comment?
Well, not only that, Doc, if she'd agreed that the bones from the quarry were actual human bones in the quarry, then that's a completely other crime scene. You know, questions could be asked, why the hell was there bones in the quarry if she was supposed to be, you know, the proper questions that should have been asked. Why the hell is there bones in the quarry when the bones are supposed to be in Stephen's burn pit? So, yeah, I agree with Susan as well. I think she was coached to hell with Kratz, and we've all seen it ourselves with the rubbing of the moustache and the rubbing of the face and the eye movements and everything like that. I'm sure he was doing all that kind of stuff to her while she was on the stand.
Correct. She was terrified of saying the wrong thing, Alice. Absolutely terrified. Susan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm not sure that she was so much intimidated by Kratz. I mean, how could somebody that talks like this intimidate? But
Well, you intimidate me.
But I think they just had more of an agreement. You know, I think she's just a state player. So she did what Kratz asked her to.
100% correct. And it was Tom Fallon. I like to call him Tom Fallon. He was the one that questioned Dr. Eisenberg, right? And so what normally happens is that they get together and they run through the questions. They rule certain questions in, they rule certain questions out. There's no doubt that there was very, very little mention of the cremains found at the Manitowoc County gravel pit. And if you go through her testimony, and we've read that and we've got it recorded and uploaded on our YouTube channel, you can actually see that she was asked strategic questions, basically saying, "Oh, are these bones human or not?" And Dr. Eisenberg kept on stating they are possible suspect human bones, right? She did not want to commit to saying that they were indeed human. Now, Nan's life, if I could just answer this question, Nan's life said, well, the PAP actually has some gentleman's agreement. So there's that. That's 100% correct. And I think basically that gentleman's agreement, because I actually did a presentation on the pap smear of Teresa Horbach and all the documentation behind it. The gentleman's agreement was basically so that they didn't have to call in the person who gave Tom Fassbender, the pap smear slides. In other words, to say, yeah, I handed over the pap smear slides, I gave over some documents, and Tom Fassbender handed them over to the crime lab. So that gentleman agreement was a stipulation, so they didn't have to call in the person who gave them the pap smear. But the pap smear was done in 2002, and the pap smear slides are actually kept for 5 years. Now, I know this because we actually checked up the manual, the actual manual belonging to Bellin Health. This is in Green Bay. And I remember Rubber Ducky actually phoned up the hospital and spoke to one of the technicians at Green Bay in Bellin Health. And they do indeed keep the pap smears for a period of 5 years. So Tom Fassbender got permission from Karen Horbach to go down and pick up the pap smear slides. Now, what is ridiculous, of course, is that documentation was provided on those slides, but they were never presented in court, right? So even though they had the documents, they never presented that documentation in court. So they kept that hush-hush. But on the legitimacy of those pap smear slides, I have no issues with them at all. They definitely belong to Teresa Horbach. The slides actually had Teresa Horbach's name on them, and there was a report written from the pap smear slides. But the way it was presented in court was not very good at all. All right, so guys, any other questions regarding my question? Jack 61. Oh, well, this sort of semi is a chain of custody. Like I said, if you have a look at my presentation, I document exactly how the pap smear slides were given to Tom Fassbender, and he wrote, there's an evidence sheet. So it's meant to be a chain of custody, correct. I've got no problems with the pap smear slides. I just wish that the documents were presented in court, so therefore everyone knew that everything was legit and above board. All right. Do we have any other comments about that question? All right. Now, why is 8675 so important? Well, basically, the reason why it's so important is because 10 tag 8675 just happens to have cut, burnt pelvic bone fragments, right? So there was a pelvic bone fragment found in the burn pit, Stephen Avery's burn pit, and it appears to be another fragment, and the bones were articulated, they were joined together, right? So the question is, what on earth is part of Teresa Halbach's pelvis doing in the Manitowoc County gravel pit if her other part of the pelvis, pelvic bone, is present in the burn pit, right? So all Dr. Eisenberg had to do was place the pelvic bone fragment from the Manitowoc County gravel pit under a microscope. All she had to do was examine it under a microscope. Alice, do you have a comment?
No, it's actually checking convictions. She's asking, that's the one KZ wanted testing, isn't it?
That's correct. So what Kathleen Donner wanted to do was hand it over to her specialist, Dr. Stephen Symes. And Dr. Stephen Symes is a forensic anthropologist, and he wrote a scathing report on Dr. Eisenberg and said that her work was, below the standard of practice, right? Which means that all Dr. Eisenberg had to do was place the bone fragment under a microscope to determine the structure of the bone. But here's the irony, right? Here's the irony. That bone fragment, the pelvic bone fragment from the Manitowoc County gravel pit, had already had cuts in it. Someone had sliced it on both sides, and you can actually tell from the honeycomb nature of the bone and the thin cortical layer on top. That's exactly what you find in a human bone. But under no circumstances was Dr. Eisenberg ever going to say that those bones, those cremains in the Manitowoc County gravel pit were human, because then it becomes ridiculous. Why would Stephen take some cremains all the way to the Manitowoc County gravel pit and yet leave the ones behind? And here's the bizarre thing, right? Dr. Eisenberg could have used histology, whereby what you do is you put antibodies belonging from human and animal proteins to determine what sticks the best. If more antibodies from an animal stick, then you know that your bone sample is animal. If more antibodies from a human stick, then you know it's human. She did not want to do that test. Alice, do you have a comment?
Angie Dickinson in chat is asking, is Eisenberg still alive? Just wondering, because KZ needs to have a good old chat with her, lol.
There's no question of the two people that Kathleen Zellner needs to put on the stand are Dr. Eisenberg and Dr. Cherie Coyne, right? Dr. Eisenberg was very strategic by not doing standard tests. She did not want to test the cremains that were found in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. And what is shocking is that Dr. Eisenberg also worked on another well-known case. Does anyone know what that case was? Alice?
I'm not 100% sure what case it was, Doc, but she also fucked up in that case as well, didn't she?
Yeah.
Because she said that chicken bone or something like that was a fetus or something, if I've got my info correct.
Yep. Thank you, Alice. Susan, do you remember what case it was?
Yeah, I can't think of her name. The guy shot his wife. She was pregnant.
Christine Rudy.
Thank you, yes.
Right? So, guys, this is going to blow your mind. The Christine Rudy case occurred like 12 days after Teresa Halbach went missing. 12 days, right? And so Eisenberg was the forensic anthropologist in that case. She had examined some cremains in a burn pit, and she said that the cremains had belonged to a human fetus, because they knew that Christine Rudy was pregnant, 6 months pregnant at the time. So she examined the bones and said, yep, they're definitely human fetal bones. Well, the problem was the FBI tested the cremains, and they did histological analysis, whereby they used antibodies. And the antibodies that stuck the best were from animal. They turned out to be animal bones, not human fetal bones. And to make matters worse, many months later, they recovered the torso of Christine Rudy, and there was a fetus inside, right? So here we have, according to Kratz, the smartest woman he's ever known, misdiagnosing bones in another case, right, at the same time. So I think our good Dr. Eisenberg had learned her lesson and wasn't prepared to do a judgment call, which is shocking, because it would have been very, very interesting if those cremains were indeed human. But we know her report says that there are many examples of human cut, burnt, calcined cremains in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. And like I said, guys, if you have a look at Euriza's interactive map, you can delve into this further. So this case, guys, is bizarre, absolutely bizarre, whereby you have evidence of someone being cremated, allegedly found in a burn pit, yet you have no coroner, you have no forensic anthropologist, you've got a prosecuting attorney that doesn't want to talk about cremains found elsewhere. They don't want to talk about those cremains, yet you've got a report written by Eisenberg that says, yep, they're cut, burnt, human remains. Guys, I'm really lost for words. I've never, ever seen a case like this, ever. Guys, do we have any comments? All right. Well, I reckon, guys, we do one more question. I've spoken long enough, and we pray to God that Jack 61 can get his microphone back, because we of course value his comments. But we'll do one more question, guys, and then we'll call it quits. All right. I continue. In MAM 2, the filmmakers make much of tracks identified by live, scent, and cadaver dogs during the days following discovery of Horback's SUV. The fact that the dogs alerted to areas in the quarry near Cuss Road, adjacent to the salvage yard, is emphasised as if it points culpability away from Avery. The show entirely omits to mention that the dogs first alerted and picked up Teresa's scent at Avery's trailer, followed the scent from Stephen Avery's doorstep to Teresa's SUV, and alerted in areas along the way as a result of Stephen driving her SUV around the salvage yard. Oh my God. And so here's the question. Why would there be dog hits outside the Avery salvage yard? All right, guys, who would like to answer that one? So you've got all these dog tracks. What are they doing outside the salvage yard? Alice?
Maybe because of the fact that she actually left the salvage yard, like has been said from the beginning.
Correct, but according to Mr. Kratz, it's because Stephen Avery drove her RAV4 there.
I mean, the guy's a pillock, dog. He is a pillock. You know what I mean? The stuff that comes out of that guy's mouth is drivel. You know, and the
Correct.
fact that people have swallowed it left, right, and centre is just beggars belief. It really is.
Correct. 100% correct. So in other words, he's trying, no matter what the dog tracks show, he's ultimately blaming Stephen Avery for doing that. So quite clearly, what he's also alluding to is the fact that Teresa's hallmark RAV4 was in the quarry area, because that's where the dog tracks were predominantly found, in the quarry area, which is rather remarkable because according to Brendan Dassey, Stephen Avery and him drove the RAV4 past Chucky's house. He never said that they went in the quarry area. But what's amazing was that none of the dog tracks followed the path that Brendan Dassey said, right? So that clearly shows Brendan had no idea about where that RAV4 was. Now, I've got to read this out, guys. This is poor Andy B. He goes, "It's 1 a.m. here. I'm drunk, singing sad songs and weeping." Now, Andy B, I'm sorry that my podcast has had this effect on you. Or is it because we're just about to finish? But anyway, thank you, Andy B. We thank you for joining us in chat. That's one of our most interesting comments, guys. So does anyone have any other comments? Why are there dog tracks outside the salvage yard? Susan?
Perhaps because Teresa was outside the salvage yard.
Yes. Now, do you think that's a potential problem?
For Kratz, it is.
For the state, it is. That's
Yeah.
correct. It's 100% correct, right? So now look, with the Jack 61, did you have a comment? Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. You got to, and I'll repeat what Jack 61 said. He said there's a potential of contamination, and that is a big issue, because remember, the scent dogs, they're following Teresa Hallbach's scent, and allegedly what they did is that they used the inside of shoes, and they had them in a plastic bag. They gave them to the scent dogs. They smelt the scent, and then they went off on their way. It's interesting because Ken Kratz says, well, you know, the dogs first alerted at the trailer, then where Teresa's SUV. Well, that's correct. Stephen Avery never denied that Teresa Hallbach never stepped foot on the salvage yard, right? We know she was there because she handed a book to Stephen Avery, who put it on his computer. Right? We know she was there. That's not the issue. And of course the dogs will pick up her scent because she was there taking photographs, right? My understanding is that the dogs didn't do a hit in his bedroom, right? They didn't give an alert. And you would think that that would be a high hotspot, especially for scent, right? But a cadaver dog is different. A cadaver dog is going to look for things like blood, flesh, things like that. A cadaver dog, but it's not. But you got to remember that a cadaver dog is not going to be specific for Teresa Hallbach. So when a cadaver dog does a hit, you don't know who that hit belongs to, right? But if a cadaver dog and a scent dog are doing hits at the same spot, then you know that that is of significance. Susan?
Yes, and what kind of dog was it at Stephen's store that made the hit? Was that not a cadaver dog?
There was a cadaver dog, but I'll have to check the tracks. I'm not an expert on the dog tracks, but there was a scent dog there as well. The scent dog actually did a hit outside Chucky's door, which is very interesting. Yeah, which is very interesting. All right. Guys, do we have any other comments? All right. Well, look, guys, I reckon what we'll do, we've We've gone for well over 2 hours. Thank you so much, guys, for listening to me basically chatting about the cremains. I just wanted to get a lot of things out there. I know there's been a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding and misinformation regarding those cremains. The cremains are very, very important. It is shocking to believe that law enforcement officers gave back animal bones to the Hallbark family. I don't believe that for a minute. They sifted out, they got all the human bones. Human bones have a distinct morphology. They're very different to animal bones. If you're a forensic anthropologist, one of your jobs is to tell the difference between an animal bone and a human bone, right? So I dare say that the Hallbark family received all human bones. Regrettably, that means that Zona can no longer test those cremains to test if they are indeed human. So unfortunately, that chapter has been shut. But look, guys, I'd like to thank everyone in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that this was a really heavy session, but I hope that you've understood a little bit more about the cremains. What we'll do is we'll continue. Look, I can talk about those cremains for another 4 or 5 hours for sure. But there's only a limit to how much information people can take in. But guys, I'd like to thank everyone in chat. Thank you so much for all your support. If you've liked the podcast, please subscribe. Our subscriber numbers are going up all the time, and that's great. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please give us a thumbs up. If you want to buy some merchandise, please check the description for the merch store. You can also buy a subscription for YouTube to support us that way. That'll be great. Thank you so much, guys. And as always, please look forward to the upcoming podcast. I believe there's going to be an open mic coming up soon. And I'm not sure when the next Crime Theory Exchange is on. Jack61, did you want to make any comments about open mic? Right. Right. So, yes, there will be an open mic tomorrow. Now, remember, this is US time, and also one at the Crime Theory Exchange on Wednesday, US time, of course. Again, thank you so much, guys, and we will all catch you next week. Take care, guys.
This has been a File Play production.